Hey everyone, welcome to Watch It, Paint It, and today's episode of being stabbed in the fingers by tiny sharp-ass claws. So I really enjoyed how fast I spat out those 3 termagants last week, and I wanted to carry on that momentum and this time apply it to a screamer killer. Now from last week's video, I'm not entirely sure if I actually want to do Slapchop this time round, as adding those layers of dry brush takes a little bit more time, and the difference between the matte white prime miniature and the Slapchop one was so minimum, I'm just not sure. But having said that, I want to try one more crack at it, and this week we're going to spice it up a little bit, and I'm going to try like a two-tone Slapchop for the first time ever. We'll do a skin much like I did last week, using a brown primer and highlighting that up, but this time his carapace and any of the other things, his claws, his talons, that sort of thing, we'll do in the more traditional black, grey, white Slapchop, and we'll see if that makes any difference. Now the reason for that is because the black will offer a stronger contrast, and it was one of the things I noticed on the carapace in the purple. The contrast wasn't as deep and strong as I would like, so let's try and rectify that this week. Anyway, let's go get this done. Step 1 is to build your new screamer killer. Get that grey plastic all nicely stuck together and ready to paint. We've shown you plenty of assembly videos on the channel in the past, so if anybody wants to check those out and see how we build up little guys, please do so. Next, I'll head outside into the garden to avoid inhaling any nasty fumes while priming. While I do get to dodge the fumes, I don't get to avoid the wind, so try to do this on a nice, calm day if you are going to do it outside. Also, on non-rainy days and non-too-hot days. Basically find that one perfect day a year to prime. As I mentioned in the intro, I'm going to be very interested in trying out a two-tone Slapchop on this miniature, so we're going to start priming the miniature completely all over in black. Give that a good few minutes to dry, but then we can put on some leather brown primer on top of it. For this, I'm going to aim as best as I can to get all the flesh like parts, leaving his hard shell in black as best as I can. As I said though, I'm using rattle cans after all. It's not going to be pretty, so if you do have an airbrush, you could do a lot nicer and more accurate job. Well, as I said, that was pretty inaccurate. I did end up with some nice black in the recesses though, so I guess that's something, but I've got way too much brown everywhere. Rattle cans are just frankly spray and pray. Not to worry though, we'll fix this up with a big boy brush, and I like to use my dry brushes when I'm doing this kind of work, so I just slap on some black back on all of the bits that I wanted to keep black in the first place. Don't worry, once we've done all of this, we'll actually get to the slap chopping part, and then finally, you know, the painting part. But often preparation can save time in the long run, and really it can make the model be the best it can be. With the black filled back in nicely, we are finally ready to move on to the slap chopping part. If anyone's unfamiliar with this technique, it's been around forever. It's just underpainting, and we're going to take these two really dark base colours, this black and this brown, and dry brush over and over, getting lighter and lighter towards the raised parts of the mini, which in theory gives a huge boost to both contrast and depth. And from personal experience, I always find it helps massively in popping out the details in the miniature. Having said that, this model, it doesn't really need it that too much. It's very easy to see the details, but it does also help with spaces between two colours. I find accuracy and completeness don't need to be as good when painting Slapchop models, as the dark recesses just fill the void and make it look like you've coloured that bit anyway, and it makes for an easier and quicker paint job once we finally get to the colour application stage. Starting the slap chopping with bony spikes is kind of like mutedy, yellowy, brown paint, and this wants to be generously dry brushed all over the leather brown part, so basically all of his skin. This is quite a step up in lightness from the leather brown, but it will complement it well. I'm also going to be colouring this little fella using Speedpaint 2, which is slightly more opaque than other options, including Speedpaint 1, so big jumps in contrast can be a good idea if you actually want to see the undershading later. For the black areas, we will be dry brushing on Filthy Cape, a similar jump in lightness with the brown, and this time we're jumping up in grey. It's a rather light grey, and it will add quite a kick to the contrast levels once we start slapping on the coloured juice. And this is exactly the same process. Move around the miniature, generously dry brushing this grey all over the black parts. We just really want to leave the very recesses black and basically have everything else grey. Personally, I don't worry about being overzealous, as the Speedpaint 2, as I said, is quite opaque. It covers it very well, and the difference in the black to grey is going to be very subtle. The final step for our slap chopping is to bust out the white, and this time we're just going to be a lot less generous. We're going to be aiming for the very most raised parts of the edges of this Screamer Killer, but we're going to do it all over both the brown and the black. I would recommend spending a little bit of time doing a couple of coats on this, bring the very most edges to the brightest white that you can. And with that, he's slap chopped up and he's ready to be coloured. I actually really like how he looks monochrome, and every time I get to this stage, I do consider whether I should just call it done and enjoy it in all of its black and white glory. But no! Let's continue and bring this boy into the 1940s with some colour. He's not in Kansas anymore. First colour to take to the stage is Howling Sand. Once again, big considerations for both Rigor Mortis, Pallid Bone, and Blinding Light, as any of these could equally be an awesome looking Tyranid skin. But as I did my Termagants in Howling Sand, I thought I'd follow suit, and I can slowly build up my Nid army and, you know, throw down on a table someday. I'm going to go around the mini and apply one quick coat to all of the skin parts, and that'll be that. Easy peasy, lemony squeezy. After his skin, we're going to bust out the Watch It, Paint It designed Princess Pink. It's a pastely pink and it kind of glows. I just really liked how it looked on the little baby Termagants. I just really liked how it looked on the little baby Termagants, so here it is again. I'm going to downsize my brush to the tiny 00, which isn't really that tiny, but I want to be a little more accurate getting in those tiny little internal fleshy bits. I'll get all these little things, what even are they, but is inside the skin layer. I'll also work on all the joints between his bones, so his like elbows, his knees, his shoulders, and his wrists. It's pretty easy work. This one's a big boy, and these bits are equally big. Now, sticking with the pink, I wanted to build up a kind of fade to purple between his elbows and his wrists. So let's thin down this pink massively, like 9 drops of medium to 1 drop of Princess Pink, and then we'll use a big brush again and stroke the paint all around the middle of his forearms down towards his wrist. Make sure you go that way so any pooling that happens, it works towards the wrist end of the arm. We can also quickly use a damp brush to feather and blend in the edge between the skin, down the arm, and the pink we've just applied if there's any sign of tide marks or you just like to get a more perfect blend between skin and pink. I actually found I didn't need to do this very much because the paint was so thin and light, it just kind of blended itself. After the pink kind of wash, we're going to make a purpley alchemy kind of wash to blend in. I'll mix this directly on top of the pink that I made before because A, it's not that precise, and B, I don't mind if it's a little bit closer to that pink. Again, this is super thin, about 1 piece of paint to 7 pieces of medium. With that mixed up, we're going to apply it in the same way and roughly the same places, except I won't go as far up the forearm towards his elbow this time. We want to leave a little bit of light pink showing through, blending into that skin, and move the purple alchemy towards his wrist. Again, making sure any pulling happens at that end. Just as before, if any blending looks a little bit too harsh or any tide marks are appearing, grab a damp brush and just thin and feather the edge of the alchemy into the pink. I had loads of a super thin purple alchemy left over after that part, so for the final blend, for the final step in this bit, I'm going to slap a single drop of Hive Dweller Purple into it and give it a good stir. So it's going to be very purple alchemy, medium-y purple mixed together. It's going to be a thin purple. And then this colour wants to be very selectively and carefully applied to the very ends of his arms / wrists. Once again, feathering if you need to, but if you've applied it carefully enough, it will add a strong but precise purple finish to the blend. I didn't need to do any feathering here, but everyone is different and you might need to, or you might want to carry the purple further down the arm, but go a lot stronger than I do. Any of these parts could be started further up the arm towards the elbow if you would like a longer transition or a stronger, more noticeable finish to his stabby stabs. I am becoming a big fan of these Tyranids. We've basically done 2 colours, the miniature already looks really cool, and we're almost done. I don't know if that's a genuine reason to pick an army to play, but it's definitely something I've started to consider. Would I actually ever even have time to finish painting a more complicated army? Guys, do me a favour and let me know if A, that's a good reason to pick a team, and B, if Tyranids are actually worth building as an army full stop. I don't want to build an army that I can't win any games with. Anyway, we're on to the biggest game-changing colour of the miniature, Hive Dweller Purple. With this, we'll colour out the bulk of the remaining miniature, getting all of his carapace armour at the same time, adding a really strong colour and really making it take shape. I'm going to move around the miniature, painting one armour section at a time at a steady pace, blocking in the colour before the speed paint has any time to dry. This should give us the smoothest finish we can hope for with speed paint. Don't jump all over from place to place, concentrate on one panel at a time, being smooth and efficient with your time. I'd recommend starting low on his legs as they're much harder to accidentally catch while you're painting up the rest, getting your fingers in the paint. You should also remember, if you need to, you can rest between sections. Let them dry so your fingers won't get in the paint. I did it all in one sitting, so it is possible, but I did catch my little fingers on some parts. So if you have a habit of getting your fingers sticky, maybe do one section at a time and let them dry in between each. A large brush is going to make light work of the carapace, but you'll actually probably want to use a smaller one around the edges with each of the sections, as well as on top of his head and his chest, where the plates are much smaller. There we have him, all of the hive dweller complete, and him looking really swell. For the next part, again, I did consider just leaving it as Slapchop. I kind of really like the black and white claws, but I decided to keep colorizing. We will use Grim Black, and we'll do all 4 of his Deathbringers with these and really make them look sick. He also has a few other pieces around his body we need to do, like his claws, talons, whatever they are. And he also has some hoovers. I mean, hooves, do them too. In the reference art in the Leviathan box, it showed his main claws had a kind of orangey red or brown, I can't quite tell, some sort of kind of glow or undercolour to them, but nevertheless, I wanted to see if I could stack a colour on top of this black and see how it looks, / if it would even work. So I grabbed bright red. I don't remember what red, let me check. Yeah, it was bright red. And used a small brush just to add some colour to the main black claws. One thing with Speed Paint 2, as I did foremention, it is more opaque than other one coat and done solutions. So I actually had high hopes that this would add a subtle hint of red on top of the really dark black, something I couldn't really do before, and I didn't hope in vain, as it did work. There is a very slight subtle hint of red in the black now. It is very subtle, and I think you could probably do a lot fancier things, but for the unbelievably low effort level of this, I'm actually really happy with the small improvement in the detail of my miniature. Thanks to everybody who took the time to leave comments in the last video and say that the dry brushing at the end was totally worth the effort. I do think it adds a little bit more time, but they have sat on my desk for a week now, and the dry brushing just really makes the carapace pop. That one just looks so much better. It's been staring me in the face. So I'm going to go with all the advice and do a quick dry brush of toxic boils. I'll grab my small dry brush and I'm going to work all around the miniature, catching the carapace pieces and trying to go against the shell so the brush catches all of the edges of each segment and really makes them pop out from each other as well as the skin. One extra thing I would like to mention about the dry brushing, and I think there was a really good point from Part Ninja in the comments, and this is that you can always do this later. It's not even Slapchop specific, but it's a really good point in itself. If you do want to get an army to the table as fast as possible to start playing, maybe skip the dry brush, get the whole army painted and get playing, and then you can go back and add the dry brush step to the entire army in between games, in between you having fun playing. It's an option, and a really good one. If you're the kind of person worrying about how long it might take you to paint before you can play, then add amazing details later on, after you've done enough to actually get to play. With that though, we have finished the painting stage of this miniature, and we're going to head outside to enjoy some sun, but also, do the base. I ain't stopping now. First, we'll super glue down some random rocks that I went hunting for in the middle of last night, in the dark, so my neighbours didn't think I was strange. When placing the rocks, I like to be fairly random, but I do always consider if you'll see them when you look directly at the miniature, so the front of the base is always a good place for the best ones, and B, that they don't obscure any part of the details that you've painted really well. If you've messed up a foot, go ham and put the rock in the way of that, but otherwise don't cover up something you've just painted good. With the rocks, we'll also apply some greenery. Here I'm using lowland scrubs, but any will do that you fancy, however you want to do the base, and the army painter makes tons of this to choose from. Once all the super glue has set and the rocks are in place, I'm going to apply a thickish layer of PVA glue all over that black plastic. I also brought a little pool of water too, because I like to thin the glue slightly as I apply it, but also it's just way too hot out here and the glue's drying really fast, like way too fast before I'm even getting to stick anything down. But look guys, I live in the UK and today is our summer, so I'll be damned if I miss it this year. With glue all over the base, I'm going to chuck on the Army Painter Brown Battleground. It's a basing material. You just pour it all over and put it on something to collect the spillage, so afterwards you can pour that back into the box. Finally, I just needed to rim this Screamer Killer until he was satisfied, and I went with leather brown to tidy up the base. Back outside for the final coat of matte varnish, just to lock in and protect all of our hard work. And with that, we are completely finished, guys. Wow, wow, wow. Outside of the prep work and the slap chopping, the actual painting of this fella took so little time. It was like 45 minutes or something, and I think he looks great for that kind of time commitment. Having said that, I'm still not really sold on Slapchop for this particular miniature. I think matte white looks just really good too, and this two-tone Slapchop took me quite a long time, probably as long as painting the actual miniature. I'll be the first to admit I'm actually not the fastest slap chopper in the West, but I thought I'd just let you know my thoughts and times on it. Outside of this nice miniature, I do enjoy slap chopping. Zombicide miniatures are my go-to slap chop creatures now, but with this one I'm just not sold on it. I hope this video helps you. What did you think? I'd love to hear your feedback and how you're going to paint your nids. Anyway, you've watched it, now go and paint it.